Are you ready to learn the truth about a man who redrew the map of an entire continent, but ended his days in an unmarked grave? History remembers him as a triumphant figure whose name was long revered in royal courts. The expedition began not as an official march, but as a grand adventure with serious legal flaws.
The commander of the flotilla left the port of call without permission, violating a direct order from his immediate superior.
This move instantly turned the entire crew into mutineers, whose return would mean immediate arrest. From day one, the stakes were raised to the maximum. However, the outcome of this grand campaign was hidden under layers of political intrigue and secret reburials.
The scale of this leader's ambitions led to a clash between two completely different civilizations.
Watch the video to the end to find out how the thirst for absolute control turned into a strategic disaster and forced the remains of the pioneer to be hidden from prying eyes. What if I told you that everything you believed about the legality of this expedition is not true? To avoid prosecution, the leader devised a complex administrative maneuver right on the new shore. He founded his own settlement and appointed a city council from among his loyal associates. This council immediately granted him powers that were completely independent of the former colony's leadership.
Thus, the illegal expedition formally acquired the status of an official mission in the name of the Crown.
The legal vulnerability was temporarily covered up with a thick paper shield. Control over information became a decisive factor in the early stages of this journey. Translators acted as chief diplomats, carefully filtering messages between all parties to the conflict. Every word was weighed to create a powerful illusion of the enormous military strength of the newcomers. Local rulers were given only enough of the truth to make them doubt their own capabilities. Diplomatic pressure grew steadily with every mile traveled. Meetings with envoys from the Central Empire always followed a carefully calculated theatrical script. The display of shiny metal weapons and loud artillery was intended to crush the will of the negotiators.
The Europeans skillfully concealed their small numbers through constant movement and complex maneuvers.
They refused to accept valuable gifts as a reason to stop, demanding a personal audience with the chief ruler. Tension mounted as both sides tried to test the limits of acceptable intervention. Allies from among the local population became a solid foundation for further advancement into the interior of the continent. They provided porters, guides, and valuable intelligence about hidden mountain routes. Without this logistical support, the expedition would inevitably have faltered in the first few weeks. The European detachment quickly became the core of a huge, diverse military formation. The commander's status changed from that of a simple captain to the leader of a large-scale coalition. Soon, the outlines of the majestic capital, located in the middle of a huge lake, appeared on the horizon. This moment was the culmination of the entire journey and the beginning of the most difficult stage of the campaign. There was no turning back now. The only option was to proceed to the very center of the empire's administrative apparatus. We would be very interested to hear your opinion on whether events could have unfolded differently without the local political coup. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the continuation of this epic story. Guess what happened next? The detachment encountered no armed resistance on the narrow causeways leading to the center of power. Instead, they were greeted by a carefully organized procession involving the highest nobility. The ruler of the empire personally came out to meet the uninvited guests, strictly observing complex protocol. This move was not a sign of weakness, but an attempt to bring the situation under tight diplomatic control. The architecture of the capital was striking in its strict geometry and unprecedented scale. Huge stone buildings towered over a network of canals, along which boats carrying supplies moved continuously. The Europeans found themselves inside a complex engineering mechanism that worked flawlessly and smoothly.
They immediately realized that it would be absolutely impossible to besiege such a stronghold using conventional methods.
The city itself was an impregnable and autonomous fortress on the water. The placement of the detachment in one of the central palaces created a dangerous illusion of security. The guests were provided with food, comfortable conditions, and freedom of movement in certain commercial districts. However, this luxury quickly began to feel like isolation in a spacious golden cage. Thousands of local warriors surrounded the palace, ready to block the narrow exits at any moment. The strategic position of the European garrison remained extremely precarious and vulnerable. Studying the inner workings of the metropolis gave the invaders valuable knowledge about its logistical hubs. They carefully recorded the locations of bridges, central markets, and food warehouses. The commander clearly understood that control over logistics was the key to managing this huge place. Every walk through the streets was a covert reconnaissance operation to gather important data. Information was steadily accumulated in preparation for the inevitable change in the current status quo. The ruler's isolation went quietly, without unnecessary noise or open confrontation with the guards. The monarch voluntarily, compulsorily, moved his headquarters to the location of the fortified Spanish detachment. Outwardly, it looked like his personal decision, but real power had changed hands forever.
This moment became a point of no return in the relationship between two completely different civilizations.
The balance of power had finally and irrevocably shifted in favor of the uninvited guests. Governing a vast empire from a single room proved to be an extremely difficult task for a handful of people. The resulting system of power was based solely on maintaining complex illusions of stability. This fragile order could not be maintained for long, as external circumstances began to change rapidly. A miscalculation in assessing the loyalty of their subjects proved fatal for the new temporary rulers of the city. Are you ready to find out what fatal miscalculation led to the destruction of this political construct? What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries because it breaks the usual picture of history. The main threat to the conquerors came not from the local population, but from their own compatriots. A new, much larger detachment landed on the coast, sent to arrest the rebellious commander. The governor of the colony decided to restore order and forcibly regain control over the expedition that had gone out of obedience. The situation instantly turned from simply difficult to absolutely catastrophic for the entire garrison. The leader had to urgently divide his already modest forces into two unequal parts. Leaving a small detachment in the capital to guard the monarch, he rapidly advanced to meet the new threat. This night march to the coast was a model of tactical flexibility and incredible courage. He was about to face the superior forces of a well-equipped European army.
Success depended on speed, cunning, and the ability to conduct behind-the-scenes negotiations.
Instead of a head-on collision, the leader employed subtle tactics of psychological pressure and covert bribery. Agents secretly infiltrated the enemy camp, telling tales of the incredible riches of the captured lake capital. Soldiers of the punitive detachment were offered to switch sides to the rebels in exchange for a generous share of the future spoils. The loyalty of the newly arrived troops began to rapidly erode under the weight of these promises. The information war proved to be much more effective than direct military confrontation between the armies. The decisive night battle took place in heavy rain and poor visibility. The attack was swift and focused, aimed exclusively at neutralizing the high command. The bulk of the soldiers surrendered without resistance, preferring to voluntarily join the victor. This brilliant operation allowed the commander to double his army in just one short night.
An external problem turned into a huge internal resource for further large-scale actions.
However, the triumph on the coast was quickly overshadowed by extremely disturbing news from the lake capital. The garrison left there found itself in the midst of a large-scale and uncontrollable urban riot. The officer temporarily replacing the commander made a fatal mistake during one of the large-scale local festivals. He provoked a sharp conflict that led to a complete breakdown of all previously reached agreements. Locked in the palace, the soldiers found themselves surrounded by a dense ring of aggressive and armed townspeople. Every sortie beyond the walls turned into a difficult tactical test for the troops. Attempts to clear the streets were met with artificial barriers and a massive hail of shells from the roofs of tall buildings. European tactics lost their effectiveness in the dense and confusing urban environment. Opponents used their excellent knowledge of the terrain to negate any technological advantage. Time was now working exclusively against the garrison locked inside. The realization of the inevitability of a complete retreat was the most difficult decision for the expedition's command. Abandoning the city meant losing their strategic advantage and admitting tactical defeat. But staying in the palace meant condemning everyone to certain exhaustion without the slightest hope of help. The escape plan began to take shape under conditions of strict secrecy and a shortage of materials. Please like this video to support the release of new historical investigations. The experiment, which did not go according to plan, forced the leadership to urgently seek a way out. The retreat had to take place under cover of darkness to minimize the risk of visual detection. Engineers hastily constructed a portable bridge from palace beams to cross the destroyed sections of the dam. Each participant in the march received strict orders to maintain perfect silence during the advance. The distribution of the load became a separate and very difficult logistical task for all units. A significant portion of the accumulated valuables was offered to the participants for independent and voluntary transportation. Many of them overloaded themselves, completely ignoring the warnings of more experienced officers. The extra weight of their luggage critically reduced their overall maneuverability and speed of movement across rough terrain. The desire to preserve material goods at this moment became a factor that directly reduced the chances of a successful retreat. The priorities of each individual came into sharp conflict with the overall rescue plan. The supports of the carts and pieces of equipment were wrapped in thick cloth to muffle the sound of footsteps on the stones. The convoy with heavy weapons was reduced to an absolute minimum in order to maintain the high mobility of the column. The road of the breakthrough was chosen along the shortest dam leading to solid and safe ground. The vanguard was to quickly install a portable bridge, let the main forces pass, and promptly move it further. The plan seemed feasible only if all external circumstances coincided perfectly. The portable bridge on which so much hope had been pinned got stuck in the silt after the advance forces had crossed. Pulling it out under heavy shelling proved to be an impossible engineering task. The main units were forced to cross the deep gaps in the dam exclusively by swimming. Heavy equipment and excess baggage inexorably pulled people to the bottom of the dark channels. Rescue became a purely individual task for each participant in the breakthrough. A huge part of the detachment simply disappeared without a trace in the nighttime confusion during the crossing. The commander, having made it to shore, silently assessed the dire consequences of this devastating night march. The structure of the army was practically destroyed, having lost all its main advantages. The survivors were an extremely exhausted group, deprived of the will to take further action. They faced a long and grueling journey through hostile territory without sufficient supplies or a clear goal. The threat of complete disintegration hung over the remnants of what had once been a powerful and confident expedition. How did these exhausted people manage to survive the next few weeks of constant pursuit? The retreat from the walls of the capital turned into an exhausting, multi-day marathon for survival. Every kilometer of the journey came at the cost of enormous effort and constant psychological strain. Mobile groups of pursuers did not allow the column to stop for a minute, constantly harassing the rearguard. The retreating soldiers moved with virtually no heavy equipment, using whatever means at hand for self-defense. The difficult terrain dictated the harsh and uncompromising conditions of the march. The available food supplies were completely exhausted on the very first day of the difficult journey. People sustained themselves with wild plants, dry roots, and the meager remains of collected fodder. The lack of clean drinking water became the most critical logistical problem for all participants in the retreat. The morale of the detachment was at a record low in the history of the expedition. Only extremely strict discipline prevented the column from finally breaking up into small groups. The route strictly bypassed large settlements to avoid new unwanted clashes. This forced commanders to choose difficult and confusing paths through remote hills and narrow gorges. The commander made the only possible unconventional tactical decision in that critical situation. He gathered the most mobile strike forces into a single tight fist for a pinpoint breakthrough. The isolation of the capital gradually became not just a bold plan, but a harsh objective reality. Preparations for the final long siege gained momentum with each passing day. The outer ring of political control around the lake was tightening. The hidden truth that everyone is silent about is that the outcome of the siege was not decided by strategy. While the sides were preparing for the clash, a third uncontrollable force intervened. Along with the reinforcements that arrived, a new, completely invisible threat penetrated the continent. The physical condition of the local population began to deteriorate rapidly due to a complete lack of resistance to the new factors. This sudden demographic shift changed the balance of power faster than any large-scale siege. This demographic anomaly spread along trade routes and settlements at an incredible speed. It made no distinction between ordinary townspeople and members of the ruling elite. Entire large settlements lost their ability to function because there was no one left to maintain the infrastructure. The usual logistics chains within the empire began to collapse one after another without external intervention. The economy of this huge and complex state quickly fell into a state of deep collapse. The city, which had always depended on large-scale food deliveries from outside, found itself on the brink of a deep crisis. This logistical problem compounded the general weakening, creating a vicious circle. The search for food became the only priority for most ordinary residents of the capital. In such difficult conditions, it became absolutely impossible to organize large-scale sorties from the city. The defense became exclusively passive and forced in all areas. The defenders concentrated only on temporarily holding key dams in important intersections. The strategic initiative passed entirely into the hands of the European Military Command and their allies. The besiegers had a unique opportunity to dictate the time and place of future local clashes. The ring around the capital closed completely and irrevocably, cutting off any possibility of supplies from outside. The city found itself in complete isolation, alone with its predetermined fate. How exactly did the final phase of this grandiose siege unfold? The use of the assembled fleet on the mountain lake radically changed the tactics of the siege. Galleys equipped with long-range guns gained an absolute advantage over the light local canoes. They easily destroyed any organized formation of boats attempting to deliver food to the city. The water surface, which had previously served as a reliable defense for the capital, became its main vulnerability. The logistics of the huge metropolis were completely and permanently cut off. The besiegers systematically and methodically destroyed the ancient aqueducts that supplied the city with fresh water. It was a harsh but pragmatic strategic move aimed at quickly depleting the enemy's resources. Residents had to use unsuitable water from the lake, which only exacerbated the internal crisis. The lack of basic resources became as formidable a tool of pressure as the artillery on the ships. Tight control over life support infrastructure became the key to victory. The besieged tried to create complex underwater traps for ships by driving piles into the bottom of shallow waters. These hidden engineering barriers slowed down the movement of galleys and created extremely dangerous situations. Several ships did indeed run aground, temporarily losing their mobility and advantage. However, these measures could not negate the overall technological superiority of the European fleet. The system of strict naval blockade continued to function smoothly day and night. This harsh tactic of rearranging the space deprived the defenders of their usual shelters and mobility. The city, which had impressed with its grandeur for many years, was slowly being wiped off the face of the earth. Its unique architectural appearance was sacrificed to strict military expediency. The final push was planned as a combined operation using all available forces. Artillery broke through the decisive gaps in the last lines of the weakened defense. Resistance finally crumbled, having completely lost unified command and coordination. The territory of the former metropolis came under the complete administrative control of the conquerors. The scale of the infrastructural changes was indescribable and forever changed the face of this place. The fall of the lake capital marked the end of a vast empire and the beginning of a completely new era. The complex mechanism of governing vast territories passed into the hands of the European colonial administration. The victors immediately faced the enormous problem of organizing life in the new territories. They had to build a new economic model based on the old destroyed systems of resource collection. Governing the conquered space proved to be no less difficult a task than the military campaign itself. However, the leader's triumph was short-lived due to complex political intrigues at the royal court. The extent of his personal power began to seriously frighten the monarch, who was overseas. Special officials were regularly sent to the colony to monitor and severely restrict his powers. Numerous lawsuits and accusations of abuse of power rained down on him one after another. The former absolute leader was forced to expend his energy on endless bureaucratic struggles. His unconventional management talents proved to be completely unnecessary for a system that required only strict obedience. The crown preferred to appoint predictable functionaries rather than charismatic and independent leaders. Gradually, he was methodically pushed away from the real process of making important state decisions. The influence of the man who had redrawn the map of the entire world steadily declined with each passing year. He became too inconvenient a historical figure for the new bureaucratic apparatus. Attempts to organize new long-distance expeditions no longer brought him the same success and glory as before. The pioneer's financial situation seriously deteriorated due to growing debts and constant legal costs. He desperately tried to prove his usefulness by personally embarking on distant and risky expeditions. But the era of great conquerors was rapidly and irrevocably giving way to a pragmatic era of bureaucrats. The time of independent leaders of this magnitude was finally becoming a thing of the past. His return to Europe in search of justice did not bring him the desired political result. The rare audiences with the monarch were emphatically cold and did not lead to the restoration of his former high status. He found himself a stranger in his own homeland, for whose greatness he had traveled so far. Thus, politics continued to dictate its terms even after the departure of the great conqueror. The secret of the discoverer's burial was carefully preserved for many decades to come. This was not dictated by mystical reasons, but by the purely pragmatic calculations of the colonial authorities. They reasonably feared that the grave could become a place of attraction or a symbol for new local uprisings. The state sought to erase the very personality from the focus of public attention, leaving only dry results. The memory of the man was subjected to deliberate censorship and targeted political transformation. Meanwhile, the vast continent continued to live by the rules that this leader had once established. New cities were built in the very places he had chosen to base his first garrisons. The main trade routes ran along the roads laid by his troops during their early campaigns. The administrative foundation he laid proved to be incredibly strong and durable from a historical perspective. The architect of the new reality disappeared without a trace, but his large-scale project continued to function successfully. Interestingly, the strategic decisions of that campaign are still being carefully studied by analysts. The ability to destabilize a huge unwieldy system with small forces is recognized as an outstanding achievement. The focus on logistics, communications, and strict control of information remains relevant in any conflict. The crisis management methods used at that time have proven to be surprisingly effective. Long-standing historical experience has become valuable teaching material for modern specialists. Today, locations associated with these momentous events attract researchers from all over the world. Archaeological excavations are constantly helping to restore lost details of the destroyed urban infrastructure. The material artifacts found complement written sources, creating a more complete picture of the past. The work of deeply understanding this large-scale clash of civilizations is still far from complete. Each new discovery forces the scientific community to take a fresh look at known facts. The history of this expedition is a vivid example of how personal ambition can change the course of time. It clearly demonstrates the vulnerability of even the most powerful systems in the face of new and unusual challenges. This is a detailed account of intelligence, the limits of human capabilities, and absolutely ruthless pragmatism. The lessons of this distant past remain extremely relevant for understanding the mechanisms of global change. The legacy of the mysterious pioneer lives on in the very administrative structure of the modern world. A careful analysis of events shows that the overall success of the campaign depended on exceptional flexibility of thinking. Rote methods of action in unfamiliar conditions invariably led the detachment to failure and deep crises. A strict information monopoly allowed the leader to effectively manage the perception of reality. Complete control over translators meant absolute control over the course of all political negotiations. The measured release of information created the necessary tactical illusions and skillfully manipulated the fears of opponents. This early form of coordinated information warfare proved to be highly effective in practice. Intellectual superiority proved to be as reliable a tool of pressure as weapons. Logistics clearly demonstrated its decisive and key role in holding captured territories. Without a well-established system of constant supply, any trained army would very quickly lose its combat capability. The blockade of the capital became a classic and textbook example of a large-scale war of attrition. Cutting off external supply routes led to the fall of a huge city much faster than direct assaults. Controlling food flows became the main key to final and unconditional victory. Patterns of human behavior in acute crisis situations have remained virtually unchanged for centuries. Human nature, with its insatiable desire for control and expansion of influence, does not change. History continues to teach us its harsh and extremely rational lessons. The scale of the infrastructural changes triggered by one small expedition is truly mind-boggling. In just a few years, the centuries-old isolation of an entire vast continent was completely and irrevocably destroyed. Two parts of the world, previously unaware of each other's existence, collided forever and irrevocably. This contact triggered a chain reaction of complex processes that ultimately shaped the modern global world. The echoes of those distant decisions still resound clearly in contemporary politics and economics. The hidden ashes of the great adventurer remain a powerful symbol of the ambiguity of large-scale human achievements. His winding path from fugitive to ruler and back to outcast is striking in its scope. It is an instructive story about how grandiose success can easily lead to long oblivion. The finale of the expedition convincingly proves that world history never ends with the triumph of one person. It always continues its relentless and endless movement forward. What do you think about the hidden influence of ambition on world history and the mechanisms of state control? Share your thoughts in the comments. It's very important for our community. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new historical investigations.